Kathy, welcome. Thank you for finding the time to talk to us today. The topic for today is leading in a time of crisis. And you and I had exchanged a couple of emails about this last week when we talked about how we feel. And I said that it's been very much up and down, and some days I don't have any energy to do anything at all. Some days I feel quite excited about the new opportunities, but I never know how I wake up, and it's very hard to plan work and do anything, and homeschooling with children and so on. So this is how we came to the idea that maybe we should do a session on how we can lead at this time. So if you may, I'll give you the word right now. Thank you.
All right, I'm very happy to be here. And I am sitting in front of my notes. I have made some notes about what I want to share with you. So if you see me glance down, that's where I'm looking, is at my notes. And I also want to share with you that just outside my home, and I'm in my office right now, there is a very active woodpecker bird who is building a hole at the side of our house. And so if you hear pound, 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 you know that the woodpecker is working hard. And so it's so high up in our house, we have to figure out how to fill the hole once the woodpecker has lays her eggs and has her birds and flies away. So that's going on in my home because it's spring here in the US. So I am hoping that we can spend this time together slowing down a bit and tapping into some of your own wisdom that you possess about leading in a crisis. In other words, you might have come on this call to think that you're going to hear the answer. And maybe there's 5 steps to leading in a crisis. Well, I could probably make up 5 steps, but that is not what is needed right now. I hope that I can pass on to you some understandings about how to prepare yourself to be in presence with others that you lead in your school, so that you can build trust. And that trust is really important right now as people are so stressed and having such a difficult time, especially Montessori families who are trying to work from home and trying to guide their child. So this is a huge change for everyone, but particularly we want to be able to possess our so-called higher powers of presence, to be able to be there for others, even if it's on a phone call. So I'm not going to give you 5 steps to leading, and that would not be good thinking right now, because the conditions that we are living in are not simple. If they are simple, then there's an answer. But instead, the challenges that we have are actually complex, and they are even chaotic. So we go back and forth in our lives right now in the world between complexity and chaos. And that's where all the emotions come up and the fears come up. And sometimes we're able to communicate well, and sometimes we just can't pull it together. So what I hope to share is some of the ideas about how to pull it together. So we know that in a time of complexity and chaos, there are not simple guidelines. Actually, there's a different approach. So that approach happens to be that we sense and then we respond. We test it out. we're really working much more from our own instincts. So we sense and we respond. And that idea is something that you start to get the hang of. You know, I need to talk to this group of parents because I know that they are thinking of pulling out of the school. So we're going to sense what is going on with them and then communicate with them and respond and test it out. So we're working in a different approach right now. And our communication is much more in that area. So why is it so important to be a leader who has presence? Well, for one thing, as I just said, it's to build trust among those that are looking to us for reassurance. And also it is to be able to be capable of reaching people in their own emotional life so that they feel that you care, because they need people to care right now. So I'm going to ask you to do an exercise, a little activity, which has to do with what's called emotional intelligence. So that's an important skill in being a leader, is to have emotional intelligence. Well, you can't have intelligence about your emotions, which are largely in your heart and in a part of your brain that is reactive, unless you can put language to it. So let's language. I would like you to stop now and just take a breath in and out, and allow your body to just slow down. And I would like you to think of one word that expresses how you feel right now. So take that in and think about one word that would express how you feel. And what I'm going to do is count to 5. And on 5, we are all going to say out loud wherever we are in the world, or you can chat the word if you'd like. We're going to say that one word. So think of it coming from your heart and coming from your own reactivity, to be able to express how you feel right now.
Dobre.
I unmuted everybody.
No, ale kedy?
Okay. All right.
Busy.
All right. So we're going to count to 5.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Fire.
Rusty.
Excited.
And you can use the chat as well if you want to do it.
I see anxious, overwhelmed, tired, sad, fear, stress, calm, hope, anticipating, calm, accepting, gratitude, swan, visualization, okay. Anxious, ready. Okay, so let's go back to mute so we can carry on. So what we have just done is to bring a feeling into awareness. And so in order to be there for others, to be present for others, we as a leader must be constantly aware of our own emotion at a given time. And so that awareness gets moved to the front part of your brain when you are able to put language to it. And so of course you're not saying it out loud necessarily to others, but you are building that awareness. And that language then is extremely important in being able to be there for others and be there for yourself. This is something as an exercise that you can do with your own community, with your staff, with your parents, so that if you're gathering together on a Zoom call or a Google Hangout or whatever it is you're using to be together as a community, take some time and lead an exercise, an activity that allows each individual person to speak their truth. And what that does is, it is one of the, you've heard me speak at Lead Montessori conference, it's one of the keys to building community. Building community requires a sense of belonging to the whole, but it also requires our individually differentiating each person. And so when we do an exercise like that, we are hearing from each individual human being. It's a principle of the Montessori environment, and we're taking it to the level of an adult community. And so I feel like it offers so many helpful ways of bringing people together. So it brings us a sense of awareness of our own emotions, but it also allows us to be together truly as a community. So that's one strategy that I wanted to share, and it has to do with healthy emotional regulation. There's a joke that used to go around a while back when people started taking up yoga and mindful practices and other things to be more present. And I'm thinking of the joke, it's about a man who has walked into a bar and he's ordered a glass of wine or maybe beer, and he gives the bartender a big bill. And the bartender comes back with his drink and puts the drink on the bar counter, but he doesn't give him his change from his big money. And so the man says, well, where's my change? And the bartender says, well, sir, change comes from within. So I hope you're laughing. Okay, so now that we've tapped into some of our own emotions, I want to go to a more analytical view of the challenge that we're in. And I want to share with you that I have a number of gurus or thought leaders who I have trained with and I respect and love. And so in the past week, I have been on 3 Zoom calls that offered me some wonderful thinking. And I wanted to share those with you. I think in my own personal self, I know that I need to kind of move out of my emotional world and get a meta view from up above and looking down on what does this all look like. And so that's a habit that I have, and I know that it's helpful in being a leader and being present to know the whole of things. And so I'm just going to share with you what these 3 really brilliant people shared with me. And I was lucky enough to be invited to these calls and took some notes, and I felt like it would be something valuable for you. So this is from a kind of meta view or systems view of what we are going through right now. So the first person I met with a group of others who have trained with her is Margaret Wheatley. And you may have read some of Margaret Wheatley's books. She has written many, many books on leadership, the science of leadership, perseverance, some really wonderful, wonderful writing. And I know that much of her work has been translated into many languages. So you might look for her, Margaret Wheatley. And so she described for us that actually we are in a time of collapse and crisis. And yes, it will all come back together. It will not be the same when we come back together. We will be much different. But we must say, we are in a time of extreme crisis and collapse. And she described that in such times, there are 4 stages that you will see people going through. And some of that is societal, you know, some of it's in your town, some of it is in our civilization. And so it's not linear necessarily, it's a continuum. But here is what she described. She described that a first stage of reaction to this time of crisis is to reach out, to build community, to give of yourself. And I would say that I'm seeing that in my own neighborhood. My neighborhood is helping each other. If I go to the store today, what do you need? I'll drop it off at your doorstep. You know, people are doing that for each other. And so we are seeing demonstrations of that. It doesn't mean that that stops, but that going on in a crisis or a collapse, what you begin to see is people becoming in a survival mode. And that survival mode, it can create hostility, anger, violence. There's been some violence on the internet lately, especially on some Zoom calls. So there are bad people out there. And so there is more of that. I just have to take care of myself and to understand that it is a part of what we are living through. And she then described a third stage that is where human beings come to realize that no one's going to save you. And that if we don't work together in a network, in a deep, interdependent way, that we won't have what we need and what we want. And that is to get beyond this. So it's another sense and response of what you begin to see in a time that is so serious. And I don't know that we are there yet, but perhaps there are little glimmers of it as it begins to emerge in our societies. And then lastly, she described that a fourth stage is when actually it's over and things are returning to a stable way. And she said at that time, people begin to take the lessons learned and they integrate them into society. And so we can look forward to the fact that we are all going to be better for this in the end, and that society is going to be looking at the ways that can improve human life on this planet, what Montessori truly wanted to see happen. So I wanted to share that with you. It's only one leader's point of view, but it is very interesting. And I think it helps to just not get so upset when we see people behaving in ways that are not healthy. You can say, aha, I see this. I recognize this. And Margaret Wheatley's last name is spelled W-H-E-A-T. L-E-Y. And I can chat it at the end if you'd like. And so getting beyond when this is over, we have a vaccine, we're not suffering from this virus. The next person that I was so thrilled to meet with is Fritjof Capra, C-A-P-R-A. Fritjof Capra is Italian. He's a physicist, and he was a very big fan of Montessori. In fact, in Rome, for the 150th anniversary, he's going to be at the anniversary event. Fritjof Capra has come to the US and spoken all around the world for Montessori. What he did in his scientific work is come to understand our human species by tapping into the cultural biology of the human being. And so what he shared with us was a letter that he wrote together with another woman. And the letter was written from the year 2050, looking back on this. And what he shared, looking back on this, was an astounding movement on the part of all people on this planet to begin to heal the planet itself, heal the global environmental crisis, and realize that we are all a part of one ecological social and a human and natural environment. And so that letter, which I think I could share with you, I'll find a way to get parts of it to you maybe, was brilliant and amazing. And I'm hearing people talk now on the internet about how can we be better when this is over. And so I found that to be amazing. And then lastly, I want to share with you a call that I was on, a Zoom call with Humberto Maturana. Humberto Maturana lives in Santiago, Chile. He is the world's most highly respected cultural biologist. And he's in his late 80s. He's amazing. And he's really the root of a lot of the work in leadership that came out of the social sciences. And Humberto was fascinating. We were talking about human beings as a social species. And he stopped us and he said, well, tell me, what is social? Let's examine social, like a scientist would, you know. And then he went into the fact that after billions of years of our evolution, our species as human beings must be together. It's in our biology, it's in our DNA. And so if we can't be together, we immediately find a new way to do that because we're being driven by our biology. And so look at us. We are all doing this online, on Zoom calls, in ways that we have access to connect. It's just amazing. And he said, you know, what other creatures in evolution are social? He says, look at the bees, look at the ants. They are social. He said, what's unique about human beings is that they have language to be able to make connection. And so language is our way. And I think as Montessorians, we so understand that access to language. He said the ants can't talk, but the ants pass information to each other through passing food to each other in their saliva. And bees, if the queen bee, the leader, dies, the bees go crazy and get overwhelmed until they find a new home to land on and start connecting again. So it's fascinating from up above looking down at us to be able to say who we are and to honor that and to be so grateful for what we are able to do to accomplish this social being that we are. I'm so grateful to have heard his wisdom, and I felt like it would be helpful to you as well. So these are things that help us show up as leaders. You see what is. You can be aware of it, and you can be aware of yourself and be aware of your interactions with others. So with our work with our school and with others, we are under stress. And just naming that, there are actually 3 kinds of stress. There is a sort of positive stress, and that is the stress that gets you to perform. You know, we're here together. We had the stress to want to be together, and we did it. We have to write a letter to the parents and get it out today so that they can feel safe. And so we put that letter out. That's pressure to perform. That's a kind of stress. And then there is an acute stress. And acute stress comes from the shock of a sudden event. And then lastly, there is what's called chronic or toxic stress. And that's when stress is so present in our life that we can't really function well. I know I left my calendar somewhere in my house because I was stressed. And I wandered all over the house, not being able to find it. And I was so overwhelmed because I needed to respond to something. And I couldn't function because I was so stressed. And so actually what we have right now is a dangerous trio of all 3 of those kinds of stresses. And so we have to give ourselves a break and give others a break in terms of this awareness of this. It's almost like, well, here's an example as a leader that you can move to. When you get up to get out of your seat on the airplane, and all of a sudden there's turbulence, and you grab onto a chair, well, then you're waiting to hear from the pilot. Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing wrong. We are fine. We are just having turbulence. Everybody relax, right? And so that's the kind of thing that you are prepared to give to others in your school community at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing turbulence. We are here for you as a school. And that's the kind of message that you would be sending out. And doing that, acknowledging that you are also under this trio of stresses. So I wanted to just share one more thing, which would be in terms of interacting with your staff and interacting with your parents. If you're one-on-one with people or even in a small group, I think many of you know the steps of active listening, but I'd like to name them right now, and maybe somebody could chat them in as I'm talking. if someone is expressing themselves to you, then the first thing you do is mirror back. In other words, if someone in your family says, I'm just getting so angry at the government, you wouldn't argue back. You would say, you would mirror that person by saying, oh, I hear that you're really angry with the government. Did I get that right? Yes, you got that right. So you are mirroring back. And that is to be able to receive that from another person without any argument, so that they feel heard. All they're needing to do is just put language to their emotion. And then the next step is to validate. So what I hear you say is, you're angry and you wish that our president would speak differently on the television. So you're validating. And then the next step is empathy. And so you reach out and you empathize and you say, oh, I really feel for you. It's not fun to feel so angry. And is there anything that I can do for you? So you're reaching out towards them. And then last, you may summarize or take action. You may just say, I wonder if there's a way that we could stop listening to the television so much and just go for a walk when we get angry. Or let's come up with a plan. And so you're in your own personal life, but also with your parents, you're able to allow them to process something rather than just argue back. Obviously, there's some difficult situations, people perhaps wanting money back and other things like that in your school. It just is helpful to be able, as the leader, to take some time to go through those steps with people before you actually come up with how you're going to respond or act or plan. And last night, I actually was on a phone call with one of the Montessori leaders in the US. She lives in Boston, and she called me because she received a letter from 20 parents in her school who had communicated with each other to demand that they get their tuition back, their money back, because their child should not be on a screen. And so they'd come up with a whole reason for their demand. And I'm sharing this with you because her instinct in response was amazing. She could have just written a letter back to all those people. There were 20 people, but she didn't. Instead, she began calling each and every one of them. And as she made the call and connected to each family, she heard their worries. She heard how afraid they were. She heard one family who is here on a visa from another country and worried that he's going to lose his job and then not be able to get back to his country. Just so many worries. And she was able emotionally to be there for them and to listen to them. And in her case, she wants to keep her school alive. And so she has to make a decision about this that will be difficult, and it may be difficult for her families. But I'm sharing that story because it meant that in this letter, she could have been so reactive, where she was able instead to reach each family and meet their emotional needs, as well as hear what was going on for them. and it was remarkable. So I think that that's the end of all my talking, and I'm welcoming you to have a discussion now.